אני חש דאגה עמוקה וכנה.
I feel a deep and sincere concern for the safety of all citizens of Israel and the fate of the state and the fate of our people. I will do everything in my power to secure our future. I will do everything in my power to secure our future.
Saudi Arabia is apparently prepared to allow Israeli jets into its airspace to conduct attacks on Iran. That's according to a report by the Israeli Channel 2 TV station, citing an unnamed senior European source. The move will allow Israel to bomb targets in Iran and avoid a lengthy detour around the Persian Gulf. The report highlighted the close collaboration and shared intelligence between Israel and Saudi Arabia over Iran's controversial nuclear program. Both countries are worried Tehran is close to developing an atomic bomb.
Before heading to the United States to address Congress, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stopped at Judaism's holiest site to say a prayer. The Prime Minister's address is meant to deter the U.S. from signing a deal with Iran.
As Israel's Prime Minister, I am obligated to look out for Israel's security, which is why we are completely opposed to an agreement between Iran and the superpowers that can endanger our very existence.
The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah king of Judah, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. And upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven, and will scatter them toward all those winds. And there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. For I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies, and before them that seek their life. And I will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, saith the Lord. And I will send the sword after them, till I have consumed them. And I will set my throne in Elam, and will destroy from thence the king and the princes, saith the Lord. But it shall come to pass in the latter days, that I will bring again the captivity of Elam, saith the Lord.
Right now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in our nation's capital. His plane landed a short time ago, and we are told he is ready to warn America and the world about doing a deal with Iran. The Prime Minister is set to address a joint session of Congress. As you may know, that's on Tuesday, after being invited by House Speaker John Boehner. There he will make his case, he says, that no deal with Iran is better than a bad deal, and that no agreement should allow Tehran any path to a nuclear weapon. But it's important to mention whom he will not be meeting with on his controversial trip. Not with President Obama. Not with the vice president either. The White House saying the president is not meeting with him to avoid interfering with foreign elections, which are roughly 2 weeks away in Israel. A group of Democratic lawmakers also says that they will skip his speech on Capitol Hill. His visit also comes as what has been termed a tense time for U.S.-Israeli relations. Netanyahu has been critical of the U.S.-led nuclear negotiations, as I just mentioned. Top White House officials have openly criticized Israel in recent weeks as well. And then a statement today from Secretary of State John Kerry that may catch some blowback from those who don't agree. Kerry said trying to reach a deal with Iran has actually made Israel safer. Doug McElway is live with the news tonight in Washington. Doug?
Hi, Harris. We're trying to get an accurate tab of just how many members of Congress will boycott this speech. No precise estimate yet, but those members of Congress planning to stay away are a small minority, at least as of right now. Politico is reporting that about 30 Democrats say they will not attend. Many of them are members of the Congressional Black Caucus who see Speaker Boehner's invitation as disrespectful to the president. Still, that number is a small fraction of the 232 Democrats in Congress. Prime Minister, as you said, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has landed at Joint Base Andrews. Before he boarded in Israel, he spoke from the tarmac.
I feel a deep and sincere concern for the safety of all citizens of Israel and the fate of the state and the fate of our people. I will do everything in my power to secure our future.
Tensions over his visit come as Secretary of State John Kerry is touting the nuclear negotiations with Iran as a boon to Israel's security.
Israel is safer today because of the interim agreement that we created. The 20% enriched uranium has been reduced to zero. We have stopped the centrifuge production. We are inspecting inside of their facilities. We have stopped the Iraq plutonium reactor in its tracks.
Kerry's assessment is at total odds with the view of Netanyahu's former chief of staff. Listen to this.
The deal that's being contemplated right now, it's an unmitigated disaster. It's one of those events in history that 100 years from now, people are going to ask, what were they thinking?
Meanwhile, Congress is also ratcheting up pressure on the White House, threatening to increase sanctions in the face of a weak deal.
And the idea that Congress would sit on the sidelines and watch John Kerry, Susan Rice, and Barack Obama negotiate with the Iranians and not care how the outcome looks, not have a say about the deal, is just mind-boggling, and I don't think we're going to let that happen.
Some Democrats agree that sanctions need to be tightened if negotiations fail. Harris?
Well, Doug, as you've just shown us, a lot of news made today on this with Netanyahu now touching down. His plane is here ahead of all of that. We had heard, though, that Democrats, some Senate Democrats, had offered to meet privately with him, and I understand he is still rejecting that invitation.
Yeah, he is rejecting it, and in his response to Senator Dick Durbin's request for this meeting, Netanyahu said that such a visit, quote, could compound the misperception of partisanship surrounding his trip. He assured Durbin that his only intention is to voice Israel's concern about these negotiations with Iran. Harris, back to you.
Well, and I do know that Senators Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid will meet together with him, I guess, right after the speech. They're scheduled to on Tuesday. But quite a different situation than meeting before all of Congress and having everybody actually show up in those seats. Right. Doug McElway, always good to have you. Thank you.
Netanyahu's visit has been publicly criticized by the White House. The top U.S. diplomat is trying to roll back the tensions, even as he prepares to return to the nuclear negotiating table. CCTV's Jessica Stone is live in our D.C. newsroom. And Jessica, we've heard some really sharp words coming from the White House.
Absolutely. Very sharp words indeed, Susan, with U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice last week calling Netanyahu's visit, quote, a destructive thing for the fabric of U.S.-Israeli relations. And so far, nearly 36 members of the U.S. Congress are planning to skip the speech, as are both the U.S. president and vice president. Netanyahu is expected to lay out once again why he believes the Iran nuclear talks are a danger to the nation of Israel, to its very existence. He has been extremely critical, as we've noted, of the Iran nuclear talks, saying that world powers have given up on stopping Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. White House aides have reportedly concluded the Israeli prime minister won't back any deal that allows Iran to enrich any uranium. But on a Sunday morning political talk show, the U.S. Secretary of State said Mr. Netanyahu is welcome to speak in the United States.
We don't want to see this turned into some great political football. Obviously, it was odd, if not unique, that we learned of it from the Speaker of the House and that an administration was not included in this process. But the administration is not seeking to politicize this. We want to recognize the main goal here is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
And also in that interview, Kerry went on to lay out the White House case for backing the Iran nuclear talks. He says Israel is actually safer because the interim agreement reached to facilitate the talks reduces uranium enrichment levels and centrifuge production in Iran. Susan.
Clearly, this is a low point in the U.S.-Israel relationship, and I cannot imagine that such a thing would have occurred under my watch nor anyone else's watch.
What were they thinking?
Well, the U.S.-Israel relationship clearly is deep and wide and broad, and it's been unique and special over the years. And I think that this current situation that we're witnessing is a rarity. There were differences between presidents and prime ministers over the years, and they knew how to bridge them or at least cordially agree to disagree. This time around, it seems to me that there's a real disconnect between the leaderships, and the feeling is in Jerusalem that the Obama administration is on the verge of going to cooking up a bad deal, and apparently Netanyahu sees this. He views this as an existential threat to Israel. He's willing to do all it takes to prevent such a threat. On the other hand, you can't escape
Can I jump in on that note? Because there is a very serious disagreement on Iran policy. That goes without saying, and the Prime Minister is going to underline it. But that aside, there seems to be a disagreement just about tactics and the formalities of how allies behave. First, there was this idea that John Boehner, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, a Republican, could invite the Prime Minister and nobody would tell the President, a Democrat. Now, equally awkwardly, there's the statement from the Prime Minister saying, I respect President Obama, which only draws more attention to the fact that he needs to announce this. It seems almost like, quite apart from the difference of policy, they're tone deaf in Jerusalem.
There's, over the years, there was a set of unwritten rules and principles that guided this relationship. One of them was bipartisanship, and making sure that Israel does not become, or Israel does not turn itself into political football between Republicans and Democrats. Clearly, this line has been crossed this time, unfortunately. And right now, everybody's playing damage control on the Israeli side, at least. That's what it looks like, with Netanyahu going to the Western Wall and talking about his respect for the president. But you cannot escape, and I was trying to say before, the notion that this has a lot to do with the upcoming Israeli elections. And this has a lot of political considerations that are playing in Netanyahu's considerations to make this speech on the U.S. Congress stage at this particular time, 2 weeks ahead of the election.
What's the impact likely to be, do you think? Because I think there's a sense in Israel, among his supporters, that clearly he's a man who knows how to get the job done, and even among his opponents, that he's a man who gets the job done. Is this a smart move by Benjamin Netanyahu, and will voters see it as a smart move?
Jonathan, you hit the million-dollar question, whether voters will see this as a smart move. Because right now, the elections is a neck-to-neck race between Netanyahu and the opposition leader Herzog. And clearly, I think the people around Netanyahu see this as an option to, possibly a speech in Congress becoming a tiebreaker in this really heated and very close race. But, really, also, what Netanyahu has working for him on the Israeli side is the fact that Israelis are not very favorable when it comes to the Obama administration, most Israelis. Second, the Iran nuclear issue enjoys a consensus in Israel as a serious threat.
Well, that's
so
exactly
if he manages to carry make this the central issue in the 2 weeks leading to the elections, he may win thanks to this.
Apart from the tactical tussle here, very serious issues at stake. Dan Arbel, thanks very much.
Doug, I'm going to start with you on this. First of all, lots of mixed messages between what's coming out of the administration and really what reality is.
Well, this is really new. This is the first time that a prime minister of Israel has come to the United States, will not be received by the President of the United States. It is also the first time in my memory that a prime minister of Israel or any country will address the Congress of the United States in joint session with a significant number of the members of one political party, as you said, Harris, the Democrats not showing up, with a deal lingering with a deadline at the end of March. Harris, we're in uncharted waters.
While we're talking with Tehran, here's just some of what Iran has been up to in recent weeks. Just today, we learned that Iran began delivering supplies to rebel forces, which kicked out the pro-U.S. government in Yemen, the Houthis. had long been suspected of being supported by Iran. So they finally got their first flight in with supplies just hours ago. Days ago, Iran test-fired more than 20 missiles in the Persian Gulf, including the mock sinking of a U.S. aircraft carrier, just to, show us, I guess, that they could do that. Back in January, more military testing. This time, Iran claiming they successfully tested 3 suicide combat drones. And in December, Iran's army successfully launched coast-based missiles, systems Iran claims are its most advanced in at least a past decade. John, we're doing a deal with them. They're doing that.
I know. I think that John Kerry has a mission here, which is to get this deal done by March 24th, no matter what, because he believes, and I know John Kerry, I've known him for 35 years. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him.
Really?
He's done a similar deal with Vietnam where there were secret side agreements, there was inspections that never happened, where we tipped off the Vietnamese before the inspection actually happened. That same dynamic is in this deal with Iran. Inspections that are not going to happen, side agreements that we'll never know about, Congress being cut out so they don't know what the deal is. The end point, I think, for Kerry is he thinks he can get the Nobel Peace Prize with his Iranian counterpart for pulling this deal off. And he thinks that's the capstone to his career as Secretary of State.
2 for this administration, then, right? And you've seen a president who got 1, but he started more war.
He did nothing. And this one for a terrible deal that is going to hurt the world.